Christopherson of Husker247. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. How was Los Angeles?
We had an excellent trip. Bruns found us a spot in Hermosa Beach is where we stayed.
Okay.
And it was just very pleasant. A little windy the first day, but on Friday. But I have to say, Brunson knocked it out of the park. I didn't know he had it in him to find a spot like that.
Well, isn't Brunson more familiar with Northern California? Isn't that like his
territory?
Yeah,
that's his area.
Yeah.
But he knew what he was doing.
Okay.
And he knew what he was doing on the freeway and everything. And
Nice.
here we are, safe and sound still. If you just sent me out there by myself, likely I'm not on the show right now, which is probably maybe better for everybody. But yeah, I don't know if I would have made it back home.
Well, so you go to Los Angeles and you go to see the Stars. What is the top celebrity that you saw, either inside the Coliseum or outside the Coliseum?
The top celebrity, the best I can do is a building. We saw down by Hermosa Beach, there's the Lighthouse Cafe, which is a jazz club since 1949, and that's where some scenes from La La Land were filmed. And Ryan Gosling walked on that pier and sang and danced with the ladies. If people are familiar with the movie, I'm not saying I've watched it multiple times, but if someone has, that's where that scene was. So that's about it.
Okay.
And then you could see Nakatomi Plaza from the press box, I think.
Get you ready for the holidays.
Yeah, I assumed one of those was the plaza at least. I don't know why what's the football game that's playing during Die Hard though? Is it USC Notre Dame or something?
Yes, I think that is. Yeah,
he had money on that game.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense unless they're playing in like the Aloha Bowl or something. But
I said
that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't want to bring down Die Hard, great movie, but yeah, there's a flaw.
This is probably a deeper dive when the season is over, but Nebraska's sitting 5-5 with 2 opportunities to become bowl eligible and even finish 7-5. But there are times, not necessarily yesterday, but there are times after games or on Mondays where Matt Rule will speak, and what he's talking about and what he stands for isn't necessarily matched on Saturday on the field. I want to go back to Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days. Because he said, when we go to our bowl game, not if we go to our bowl game. And he also said, I expect us to be good. I expect us to win. I expect us to be relevant in the conference. What do you think is, and you know, when you're going sideways, sometimes it's hard to find the parking brake to pull to stop a losing streak. But where do you think the season has gotten off track, that it doesn't match what Rule had a good vibe of his team that they were going to be, that instead of being 10-2 good or 8-4 good, they're right now sitting at 5-5?
I think he thought they'd be more explosive on offense. You can take the comment you said, combine it with the one about the murder people comment. You know, if you can bring them up and you can go over the top on them. I think there was an expectation there'd be more of that. If you want to just do the shorthand of it, so you had an offense last year that was, let's just say, like 115th or something in a bunch of stats, and the thought was, this thing's going to get up into like 50s range maybe, right? And if you do that and you have all the returners on defense, I think they were confident the turnover margin would turn around, which it definitely did for the first month, and now it's kind of come back a little bit. But I think it was a combination of those things. But it was a belief, basically, the offense was going to be more in the middle part of the statistics than they are, instead of the lower tier. And the defense could hold serve, and you combine that with a good turnover margin, and that's, you know, probably was in his mind worth 3 or 4 wins if you just wanted to go about it with that layout, you know. So I think that was it. And I think if that had played out like that, I think he's probably right, but it hasn't.
What concerns you more this Saturday, defense or offense for Nebraska?
The offense. I mean, I think this is a good matchup for the defense. It's been disappointing, like Rule said that, sort of the veteran crew of that unit, talking about the defense for a second, I think kind of, they let the ball go through their hands in that game. I mean, literally. I mean, that was a case where you have like 3 or 4 plays where if your guy makes a play on the ball where he's positioned, you probably win the game. And that's a group you kind of would expect at this point in their careers to do that. So it was just a disappointing day for them. But it's still the offense trying to prove that they can consistently do stuff. I left the game encouraged by Holgerson's first go at it. I thought there was definitely, we've talked about it on this show a lot, Nick, with the pace thing, right? Where It's like, well, let's get something going here. It's now I always feel like you're breaking the huddle with 10 on the clock and this stuff. And I felt that was there. The plays were coming in, and I felt like guys were maybe working a little faster because of it. And then I looked at the stat sheet, and I was like, man, 310 yards. It was, 5 yards per pass attempt. It just wasn't really good statistically. So I went back and watched it. Was my initial reaction that this was encouraging, right or not? And I will stick with my initial reaction. I go back to a few plays where you just have to make them. And some of it comes to your QB. Your young QB's got to make some plays in these moments. The one where he slid down early. He forced a throw where he didn't look off a guy, where you have 1st and 10 on your own 45 in the first half that gets picked off. You drove the ball 30 yards on that drive up until then. So there's 2 drives right there where you have promising stuff going and it just stops in its place. And then, of course, I think they probably should have had at least one of those red zone scores, either by way of officiating or if Ryla had seen Banks on the play. So I thought the plays were there to be made and there was better pace. So I'm hopeful that they can build off that. But they're definitely the group with something to prove to me.
If you are, and you look at Holgerson's track record, and I agree with you about the offense. They also snapped the ball sooner than they had been. They were going back to September when they were snapping it earlier. Holgerson speaks today, and he's put 6 guys in the NFL, and Dylan is his latest project. If you look at what's the biggest thing that you think might be fixable in the last 2 games, and then would be the biggest thing that needs to be fixed in the offseason when it comes to him?
Man, that's a tough question. I'd love to be a fly on the wall and go inside those conversations. I think it's just you heard all the talk about getting the ball out of his hands quick, and I think they're just going to double down on that, like having the confidence to, step through your throws, don't hold on to it too long. And there was some positivity there. Obviously, I named off a few plays that weren't Dylan's best. There's been growing pains, no question. I think he's, from everything we've heard, he's a very great student of the game who loves to learn, and I think is going to have an open mind to everything he hears and want to take it in. And so I just think you take a few of those plays that I mentioned and you go over them with them, and you hope he processes them a little bit better this next week, but also you keep forward with that. Let's get the ball out quick. Let's have confidence in where we're going with it, because there was some of that too. And that's why I felt somewhat encouraged. Like there was the drive where Nebraska scored on the Emmett Johnson touchdown to tie it at 14. There was a throw early on in that possession where he hit Banks for about 15 yards, and the blocking was good. Throw was right on time. Banks just ran a crisp route. It was just like it's supposed to be. It was just a textbook play. And I turned to Brunson. I was like, it feels like it's been a month. Yeah. I'm exaggerating, but it feels like it's been a month since we've seen just like a play like that. It was just like boom, boom, boom. Everybody did their job well. It wasn't anything fantastic, but it was just solid. And if you can just keep building on that solid, and a lot of good stuff can happen. So that's those type of plays are, I think, where it's at. It doesn't have to be some highlight thing or something that compares to Mahomes or some of the stuff that was getting built up in the first month of the season. It's just those plays like there that it doesn't have to be over the top. It's the simplification of stuff, but let's just do it really well. And that was an example of that to me.
I don't know if there's a good answer to this, because a lot of it has to do with how they're used in the offense too. But Have we seen what the ceiling is for this for 2024, the tight end position?
Well, I mean, we're to the point in the season where I feel like you're close to sending the book to the publisher on sub, like what it's been. Right. So yeah, kind of. But
and is that one of the more disappointing things when it comes to this offense too? I mean, there's a lot of things to point at, but where does that one maybe rank on the level of disappointment with this offense?
I definitely thought in August Fedoni was going to have a lot higher numbers to his name, and so was Borkercher, actually. I thought that kind of surprises me. So I don't know. I think Dana might, to your question though, I think Dana might feed those guys in at least one of these two games a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if Fedoni has a better statistical game. He didn't get the ball a lot against USC. What did he end up with, by the way? I don't know. You probably have the stats in front of you. It felt like he barely got it to me. But I think this is a game where you could see him more involved. I think Holgerson likes him from what I've gathered and sees different ways they can use him and line him up. So I wouldn't count him out from having a stronger finish. But I'm curious, like if they can get even sneak Borkercher or Lindenmeyer. You saw on the one where he one-handed it. That was a nice play. Maybe a little bit more of that. But I'm with you. It does surprise me that the numbers aren't higher, probably.
What do you think is going to happen this weekend? I mean, we watched Fickle yesterday. They fire Phil Longo. They hung in there with Oregon. Their defense has given them a chance, but their offense at times has been really anemic. Nebraska just made a change. Both teams need one victory to get to a bowl game. We didn't think that when Fickle and Rule were hired, BC, that year two of each other's tenure that we'd be sitting in this situation. What do you think is going to be the vibe, and what do you think how's this game going to unfold on Saturday?
I think there's going to be a nervous energy there in the crowd, and Nebraska needs to start strong and let that emotion build up because it has the potential. UCLA had this too, though, and that's why I think people are a little on edge because there was sort of a expectation going to the stadium a couple weeks ago, like this is going to be the cathartic moment, right? This is going to be the sixth win, and then you just start the way they did. They couldn't get off the field, so to me, that's a big part of the sharp is like right off the bat, putting your foot down on a third down, getting off the field, having that drive where you convert a few things, and maybe you're playing from in front and you let that emotion build up. You heard Matt Rule yesterday speak about how this is the biggest one of the biggest coaching weeks in his career. And he wasn't, of course, just speaking about getting a sixth win and all that. I do think there is like a lot of extra feelings around this game because of how many people are playing their last game and the ties and the Isaac Giffords and the Hutmakers who have stuck around, Javen Wright. But also, I thought the most interesting part, honestly, was him laying out all the walk-ons. And this is sort of an end of an era, with us going to these 105 rosters where some of these kids we've seen in a Husker uniform all our lives in certain small towns and all this stuff, that it's not going to be quite the same. And so I don't know. I do think Husker fans should take stock of that because nobody has been more the capital of the walk-on world than Nebraska football. And that's a layer to this game where that's going to be changing, the way it was. It's going to be different going forward. So all this is kind of piled together. But Nebraska needs to control the emotions early, get in front, and then I think feed off that and hopefully get this crowd behind it, having it be one of those days where all that stuff kind of comes together and it can be a moment for this Husker football team because if they do win and Ty Robinson comes into the post game and they've got that sixth win, it won't be much to like a person in Boise, Idaho that Nebraska got to 6-5 or something, but it's going to be emotional to those guys that they did that and that they broke through for that goal. And so there's a lot on the line. And so anybody who's tuning out now, I understand the frustration, but man, this is an important week for Husker football.
You guys get a chance to talk to Dana Holgerson for the first time since he has been named the OC, there's a lot of things that I'm sure are going to be thrown his way. BC, what do you want? What do you want to get at the most? If you have the first question, what is priority number one in learning more about his short time here, but also just anything with this offense and him managing it?
Well, specifically to the offense, it's to the question you guys asked earlier. I think it's like with Dylan, you see such a talent with potential, but what can you get out of him in the short term, and then what is the long term goal beyond that? So I think you're probing a little bit about what he thinks they can get done. I'm as interested in as anything in the big picture stuff of, like, obviously he's got a nice buyout thing going with Houston.
Yeah.
Really could pick his spot. Why right now with 3 games left in the season? Not something you had to do, but obviously it's a runway into 25. So I'm curious just to the timing, why he felt it was right. And maybe he just, there's sort of a thought that, like, definitely Rule wants him back, it seems like, next year, but always got to see how it plays out. But maybe he gives away, like, what he's thinking about next year right today. I don't know. So, that could be a big news headline if something like that happens. But I think you're curious about the timing and just why it worked for him and how the relationship with Rule and his knowledge of Rule made him believe, like, yeah, let's do this. Let's get this place going. Like, what made him think that can happen? So I think those are the things I wonder about.
I'm going to chat here on this, and I want to go back to Ty Robinson because you know what the dynamic has developed of the older guys, got to get them out of here because they don't know how to win, got to play younger guys. But
yeah,
maybe the best player right now in the program is an old guy, and he's in his 6th year. So I go back to the recruitment of Ty Robinson, who in 2018, he was the first Nebraska recruit that had all 11 coaches on Nebraska's staff, including the head coach, show up at his high school. They came to visit him in 2018. He sat down at a table. We all watched his recruitment and his choice, and it was Bama, Oregon, or Nebraska, and he came to Nebraska. That was way back in 2018. For the last 2 years, he has been better than he's been in his career. He came back to go to a bowl. They're not bowl eligible. It's now or never. We heard yesterday that he got into a little fist fight in practice last week with a scout team O-lineman as there were scouts watching. You know what he said after the game on Saturday. You were there. You've interviewed him. You know what kind of an emotional guy he is. What do you think the general reaction is when they announce on Senior Day from Arizona, Ty Robinson?
It should be one of the louder ones there's ever been, really, because he's a great example of sticking with something when it's not going your way. And I know there is that contingent of fans who are like, yeah, let's move on to what's next. There's always that thought. But you've got to respect somebody for continually showing up into the arena when things aren't going his way. And, by the way, continually showing up to do interviews when things aren't going your way. And I try to stay pretty unbiased about stuff, but there's personalities you go to really appreciate in your time covering it, and he's definitely one of them. And I've done a lot of post-game interviews and sitting 10 feet from him or whatever, where you could tell it's been emotional. Like after that UCLA game, I thought, I don't want to say he was going to cry, but I mean, it was borderline, like, he was close to tears, I felt like, after that game, like what it meant to have that opportunity escape. And so sometimes when you're up that close to it, you see how much it means to a guy. Like, I think a lot of people listening watch the Chasing 3 the videos. And after the Colorado win, people might remember he was like basically had a bear hug around Matt Rule all the way through the tunnel going to the locker room after the game. And you could tell it was like, this is why I came back. This is it. This is happening. And it felt like it was kind of one of those seasons that was developing early on. And now it's sort of in this pattern of, okay, it's like the last one. So for guys like him, if there's some fans, I guess, who aren't as invested right now or aren't as fired up about this game, maybe you think of like a face of like Ty Robinson on Saturday morning to get fired up, because that's a guy who, it would mean a lot for this program to get a win for a player like that.
Yeah, it'll be It's just be an interesting Saturday. You brought up it's a huge week for Nebraska football across the board. BC, as always, I appreciate the time.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys.
Brian Christopherson from Husker 247.